This is Becoming Inclusive from the Kaleidoscope Group, where we're thinking differently about diversity, equity, and inclusion for more empowered people at work. We're committed to real change, and that begins with real conversations. Welcome in.
Welcome to another edition of Becoming Inclusive. I'm your host, Reginald Ponder, and I'm here with my co-host, Catherine Potts. Kat, it is good to see you today.
Hey, Reg, long time no talk.
well, speaking of talking, one of the things that I love is that we get to talk to so many interesting people and have these different entry points into the subject of becoming inclusive. And today we have Flor García, who is the Global DEI Consultant, Engagement Leader, and Subject Matter Expert for the Kaleidoscope Group. Hey, Flor, how are you?
Hello, Reggie. Hello, Kat. How are you today?
Hey, Flor.
I'm so excited to be here with you too.
Well, we're excited to have you. And Flor, you know, we had a discussion offline talking about so many things. And from our discussion offline, I came up with this title called There's No Such Thing as a Universal Language. And before I get to you, I kind of want to frame it out just a little bit, is that we always talk about companies doing these things called cookie cutter approaches. So you come to a company and they say, oh, I got a solution for that. I have a solution for that. And when we're talking just the United States, we understand this concept that there's no such thing as a universal language, because if we speak the same, do the same, act the same, even with companies that have the same problem, we are not going to be effective. And so I like the fact that companies have started to recognize this here in the United States. But because you get to see things from a global perspective, we're going to expand that conversation to talk about this from a global perspective, looking at other companies in different countries. And you gave us, Kat and myself, this example of just words. And we were like, well, how so? And one of the words that you talked about was this word curious. So
You mean nosy? You mean nosy, right?
Yeah, curiosity.
So I'm curious.
Yeah.
How would that word be different?
Yes, Reggie and Kat, that was something that really got me, because I work for a nonprofit where I serve as a volunteer. And during the several discussions that we have for our values, one of the values that we came up with was curiosity. We wanted to always be curious related to learning, curious related to always being open to other people's experiences and growing from it, from what we learn from each other. This is a global organization. So I was sitting there with people from the United States, myself, I'm from Venezuela. There were people from different countries in Europe, and also a couple of members from Southeast Asia. And one of the members brought up the fact that curiosity sounds so appealing and so positive to us here in America, in the United States, maybe in the English language. But from her perspective, in her language and in her culture, someone curious was someone nosy, someone wanted to know everything, but in a negative connotation. So she had a strong reaction against this word as one of our values. And it clicked. Then you realize that sometimes we believe that the words and the meanings that terms have in our languages kind of mean the same for everyone.
Right. And to be fair with that example, I feel like, in the US, sometimes we use the word curious, to kind of as a mirage to actually being nosy. So there's also some truth in how that word is even used here. And I can understand where it can, be have a different meaning, different impact somewhere else. And that impact is what's important when we're talking about there not being a universal language.
And the reason I'm really happy that we talk about this, because when we talk about becoming inclusive, we have to understand that words matter, and sometimes people will say, well, potato, tomato, tomato. So why are you splitting hairs over this? But particularly when we're talking about cross-cultural and from a global perspective, it really, really matters. Would you say, Flor?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because like you said, word matters, and we're using words to convey a message. In this case, we're values. Imagine the values of the organization. And we want the members, the board, the people that join to feel identified, with these values and to act in a way that they honor the values of the organization. So imagine that as a company, as an organization, we are using words that don't resonate with everyone in the same way.
Right.
We need to be curious. We need to learn about that. We need to realize that we need to take into consideration the different nuances that language has.
And I think even if your goal is to diversify your company, even down to your handbook, what's, your handbook, your onboarding, does this make sense for everyone? And I think those are some places where that's sometimes neglected, and it can make sense why some people often don't understand what's going on, or sometimes don't even read those things at just a basic level because it means something totally different to them, or it's not impacting them the same way.
And Flor, because you speak several languages, if I were using the word curiosity, how would that translate in Spanish?
In Spanish, it has a positive connotation. Actually, we use it as someone that is ready to learn. When I said I'm curiosa, I'm curious, is someone that is always eager to grow, eager to find out more. So that's why at that moment, during that discussion, it didn't resonate with me. And in German, it's also a positive thing, I would say.
So in German, it would be what word?
In German, will be someone that is neurig, or someone that is, curious, eager to learn. It will be the thing in this.
And how would you say that in German? Because I'm gonna press you on that one.
Oh my God, I love it. Yes, it is called. Oh, how to pronounce it well? Neurig.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can tell you many. But for example, diversity, Vielfalt, or Diversität. There are several.
I love it. Since we have you on, I could not resist at least hearing you in these different languages, particularly because we're talking about globally. One of the things when we talk about globally, we look here at the United States and we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yeah. And I think for the most part, people understand it, even though there's still some pushback on all three of those words. But from my understanding, globally, they don't always translate diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity in that it doesn't look the same every place. So when we start talking about diversity, it might be gender diversity as opposed to racial diversity. And so there's some different things that come to play there. So firstly, I want to talk to you just about diversity from a global perspective. Yes. How does that look? And what have you seen in terms of its appearance in different countries?
Yes, absolutely, Reggie. It looks very different. The more we deep dive into global organizations as DEI consultants, and the more we realize that everyone has the need to bring diversity to their workforce and their workplace, we realize that diversity means different things in different places of the world. And I think that this is something that we are as consultants at KG doing pretty well, because now we have expanded our focus. Like you say, it's about expansion, expanding our thoughts from approaches that are more US focused to that global aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And yes, like you said, maybe when we think about diversity here in the United States, our minds go straight to race, gender, and age. But then when you go to other areas of the world, diversity encompasses several dimensions. And maybe that race is not one of them. So Yeah.
And so what would you say about equity? Because I mean, the E in DE&I, I mean, that got added domestically. We're talking about the US, got added in there too. So, and here, that's still something not everybody totally understands. I mean, there's those images we show. Equity is misunderstood still here in the States. So I can only imagine that abroad, there's that probably something similar.
Yes, absolutely. We have seen that with clients in Europe as well, because it's like when I mentioned the E is equality. And when we go deep and start talking or discussing about equity, even we had the experience of one client that decided to take the E out of the equation and say, hey, let's just do diversity and inclusion, because equity had become such a challenging word, especially in France, where equality is the word of preference, because it makes sense. It's giving everyone the opportunity to do something, to grow.
So that makes me think, so when you think of that in terms of like inclusion, right, versus equity, and I don't want to go too far left on this, but it just makes me think of that, the privilege aspect, because a lot of equity is also rooted in how are you using your privilege to help create equity for other people. So how does that translate if we're leaving that out, in other countries? Or do you see that, or, how does that work?
Before you answer that, Flor, is it that like the word diversity really started to grate on people? Anytime you would say diversity to people, they're like, oh, here we go. We're talking about that again.
Yeah.
And so we had to try to dimensionalize diversity so that people, when you saw the word, it just didn't have that negative
reaction.
That kind of reaction. Is that similar? I wanted to throw that in your answer to Kat. Is that similar in some regard when you talk about equity?
Yes. And what is very important to highlight, Reggie and Kat, is that many times we hear that it's an American term. So we need to really highlight that we are creating a DEI journey that is tailor-made, that is going to take into consideration all those global nuances. And because once we use those three words, those three terms, it creates a reaction. Oh, this is an American thing.
Yep.
And so when and I think what I'm picking up here is that this American thing is not necessarily that it's anti-American, but that it's saying that you have not paid attention to my culture, to my problems, to my situation, to my environment. Yeah. Would you say?
Yes, absolutely, Rachel. That's what they tell us. I don't think that you have the right strategy for us. Not because they are anti-American. It's because they immediately say the reality in the United States is completely different to the one that we're living here.
Right.
And then is the question, tell me more.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like at KG, it's like it has to be customized.
Yes.
It's just like there's not one universal language. There's not, one size fits all for this. And even when companies are looking at this abroad, you can't look at it like that. You can't look at it narrow, right? Yeah. Because there are so many nuances. And I think that's sometimes what can get a little mixed up, because you're like, let's just do this. Let's just check this box. But it's so nuanced. And what I'm hearing you say, it's even if you're an American-based company, if you have, colleagues abroad, yeah, you have to consider those things. You can't just think because your main hub's in the U.S. that you don't need to consider how you're sort of attacking your DEI initiative in a global way.
Yeah,
and I hear people say, so when I hear you say that, and I'm an American, I'm going to say this, Flor. Yeah. We've heard this before. Oh, the countries are different or whatever. But we still have this tendency to think that our way is the best way. So from a global perspective, how do you get across this issue? I think this is what Kat was getting at. How do you get across this issue to talk about equity without talking about equity?
Right. Yes, I think the most important part, and this is what we do, is just to listen. That's what I told you about the tell me more. When you have that reaction about equity, for example, tell me more. Why doesn't resonate with you? Why are you reacting this way? And they always bounce back to equality. Oh, well, we are talking about equal opportunities for everyone. We have been doing this for ages. This might be something new in the United States, but we have done it. It's part of our national anthem. You receive all these comments. And we start picking apart or taking apart the pieces, not in a bad way, but just noticing what things mean equality for this client or for this culture, and then how we relate into the equity. And one big surprise is that many of the things that they consider equality are what we see in equity. So it's just to bring them there. It's how we bring them, how we close that gap in a way that we can have the E working in favor for the organization. It's magical, the transformation, when you see how we can navigate together these terms, even beyond across differences, and how we make it happen.
Because here in the States, when you talk about those two words, equality and equity, they too get people really revved up,
and stumped. They're like, you say them together and people are like, wait, what? Like they don't even see that, people stumble on those two.
Yes.
And so so you're from Venezuela, right?
Yeah.
And so do you see, when you talk about equity and equality, is there a difference there in Venezuela?
No, we use equality like for everything, encompass even equity.
And then from a Germany perspective, excuse me, do you see a difference there as well?
It's similar. It's almost similar. When you define it, when you ask a German client, define or tell me more about what equity means to you, the definition is very similar to equality. It's almost the same. And that's what now that you brought up the Spanish aspect in Venezuela, I studied law. And when I went to law school, we will define equality and the definition that even we have to learn in Latin. Don't make me repeat it in Latin, please. We needed to learn it in Latin. It was pretty much encompassing the aspects of equity as well.
Wow.
So in Venezuela, we don't, equity doesn't resonate like the value, the meaning that we want to put here in the United States.
So what I'm taking away from this discussion, because we started off, and I'm so glad, Kat, that you brought it back in, is that there's really no such thing as a universal language. And we're not talking about it from the languages that we speak as much as we're talking about from the concepts that we use, is that the way in which those concepts manifest themselves is not universal.
Yes,
I think that, Anne, I know I've used the word impact a couple times, but I'm saying that because our intention can be, for example, we really want you to understand equity. We really want you to get that. That's the word to go with. But the impact isn't going to align with that. And that's what's important. Our intentions can be great. Hey, we really want you to understand this word, or this is the right word, but you can't really do that because it's not hitting the same.
Exactly. Yes, Kat, and you have just made me think, and we get so stuck in the word, in the term. We need to step back and look and see, how can if what you understand is equality, I don't want to prove you wrong. That's not my first step. I don't want to prove that I'm right. I want to join efforts with you and show you a journey that is going to have equity there. And then maybe along the journey, I'm going to tell you, hey, remember when we talk about equity? This is equity right here. It's just a step by step. It's a journey that is organic and evolves. So maybe we begin with actions until we're able to go to that term and be able to define it all together.
And what I'm also getting from this, Flor, is that we may never, ever come back to the word equity. Because as long as the things that undergird equity are there, who cares whether you call it a tomato or a tomato? Is that what we're really trying to do is move people along that journey, and if those pillars are there, does it matter that you call it equity or equality, as long as they're there? I think the reason that there's always been this this delineation between the two is because I really like the fact that people talk about how when we treating everybody equally does not necessarily mean that it'll get everybody to the same spot.
Exactly. Yes.
And that thinking still needs to be somewhere within in the work in which you do, I would think.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I was telling you, that we kind of as consultants move them there with the journey. And you said something that is so powerful, Reggie, is that maybe we don't come back to the work, but once you see your client showing the behaviors that mean to be living equity, exactly, then it's like, okay, my job is done. I'm going to give you both an example. We created a presentation, a journey that was in Spanish, and the title at the beginning looked too long when we wanted to translate conscious inclusion roadmap for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what we did as consultants, Spanish native speakers, was to sit down and say, how we bring something that gets attention, to this level of organization. How do we get these workers to feel it? That doesn't sound so scientific and so. So we said, translated to English, it was something like the path to inclusion. We just brought it down. The path to inclusion includes being diverse and respecting diversity. The path to inclusion also it means that equity that we are talking here, but we brought it to the language that our people, our clients were meant to understand, and that's why the translation was so beautiful. At the beginning, it was like, oh my God, we are rebels. We're changing the name of this education roadmap. But then we said, it is what it means in this language, and this is the way to bring it to the client.
And I think that's being really outcome focused, right?
Yeah.
And what I love about the example is that a lot of times when we talk on this show, sometimes people might walk away and say, well, how does that tie into becoming inclusive? And you just helped me with that tremendously. And I think the number one thing that at least I take away from this is Kat asked you, said, well, how do we do it? And you said, well, the number one thing we do is listen.
Yes.
The number one thing we do is listen, and that we're not trying to get people to get to our point of view. We're trying to understand their point of view to help move them along, to help the whole organization, as opposed to be like, well, I think this is the right way and this is the way to go, but listening and I'm listening to you. See that? See how I got that?
I love it.
At least he listens to you, Flor.
Yeah, I see. Yes. Kat, you mentioned something that I don't want to let it go, not to pass. It's the privilege.
Oh, yeah.
And that brought me again to this example of the journey that we prepare in Spanish for workers. It was a group of maintenance workers, people that work in the field or in the property, in the offices. And I realized not everyone has the privilege or the advantage point of have heard about diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the way that those three words really mean. Sometimes you see it in the media, you see as a very two polarizing or three polarizing words, but not everyone has that opportunity. So when I'm inviting you to a training, or when you tell your people, your members, your employees, hey, you have to do this training, and you see these three words sounding there and you don't have an idea what is it, yes, you can learn it during the learning process. But what I mean is, it is much easier when you bring something, even the title, words that speak to you. When I bring a message that I can be conveying the language that you are going to understand me, and then we move together to another place.
It's powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see, Flor, and then you want to bring in this whole concept of privilege. I know Kat started it, but you want to talk about privilege, and you know that is a 2-hour conversation. Is it what?
I'm just putting myself on the spot to come back.
Yes, I said I didn't want to go too far left, but it really got me thinking about privilege in terms of language and how that's
language. Yeah. How accessible it is, because and again, I'm telling you, this was one project that I have within KG as a KG consultant that really impacted me, because the initial idea was to just translate the material. When we sat down and listened to the client and realized that the audience needed more than a simple translation, they needed something to be that is spoke to them, something that you could say, I get it. Then that's when this project started, and it wasn't a translation of the journey. It was just adjusting everything custom made to that audience that we have.
This really resonates with me, Flor. I used to work in advertising, and when we would do things from an English perspective, then we would run to try to figure out how to have it translated from a Spanish perspective. And the Spanish creatives would always come back to us and say, you should have had us in the planning process, because the way we might say it, the way we might approach it would have been different. But because now you're done with the commercial, you're finished, and we have to translate it, it's harder because there's not a one-to-one necessarily all the time. And even some of the situations, like maybe the way you pass the drink or what you said when you passed the drink might be a little bit different. And so why not just have us in the creation process? And that is becoming inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces right now in the global practice within KG, is that we have realized that for this DEI journey, the global nuances need to be considered from the beginning. It's not like we bring a journey, a roadmap, a strategy, and they say, oh, how we can adjust it to Asia or Africa or the European continent. No, let's work together from the beginning so it's ready to go and resonates globally, but it's tailored locally. So it's a challenge.
I just have to bring up an example that both of you are making me think. I know we have to wrap it up soon, but I just made me think of this is when I'm watching a movie on Netflix that was it a Spanish movie, right? And they have these voiceovers that are in English. And I'm watching it, and what is most distracting to me is that the voiceovers are not matching the passion and the message that was initially trying to be conveyed. So I have a hard time with that, but I'm saying this because the point is just translating isn't enough. That's all that's happening, is just translating at the most basic level is not enough.
Yeah. And I like that, Kat. And sometimes you can't avoid it. So I just watched a movie called Parallel Mothers, and yes, fantastic movie. So yes. Flor, if you saw the movie, you know that the English translation did not do the justice to the film. I knew a little bit of Spanish, and I could tell a couple of times where now that didn't sync up. And so you can't help that. I mean, because you do want other people to watch the movie. So I'm really glad that they put the subtitles and figured that out. So sometimes you can't figure that out exactly because there's not a one-to-one. But when you can, or do a better job from a creation perspective. I'm glad that movie, by the way, started in Spanish. So we didn't have to try to translate the other way. But what a wonderful movie. I saw you chomping at the bit, so I'll let you.
And a big fan of Almodovar movies, Parallel Mothers, Broken Embraces. And I always tell my kids, you need to watch, well, they're already teenagers, 18, 17. But I tell them, you need to watch it in Spanish. The passion the dialogue, the message, the power, you feel it in the language that the director and the script was meant to be.
Yeah, I find myself not being able to understand a thing, but I rather watch it in the language, the native language, because I just feel it. I just feel it more. But I might not understand one word.
You know that this brings me to the title of this podcast. There is no such thing as a universal language. And I think that as organizations, right now I'm speaking to the audience, to the public, and also I'm thinking as a consultant, we need to be very intentional and mindful to think globally, to think about the accessibility of the language we use. And even when we think that diversity, equity, and inclusion are universal words that everyone understands the same, that they mean the same for everyone in every corner of the world, that is not the reality. So
that's really the last word, but I can't let you leave with the last. I can't let you leave without giving us, because we're talking about becoming inclusive. So I need you to give us a last word in Spanish, please.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Do you want, well, inclusion is very similar. Inclusión, diversidad, equidad. Those are the three terms. Yeah.
Kat?
They're here. Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on. You've inspired so much thought for me. I wish we had like an hour, 2 hours. You'll have to come back on, because honestly, if I speak anymore, we'll be on here longer, because my mind is like now going in a million directions about different things. And even at emotionals, where are we getting at? Where are people?
Yeah.
When we meeting people where they are, that whole thing. So you don't want to give it back to me, because we'll be on here for a while longer.
Yeah.
Reggie, we're going to leave you with the last word.
Okay, well, I will take the last word to say that I guess, Flor, you and I need to talk offline about parallel mothers, because it was terribly interesting, and I'd love to get your thoughts. But I love that you gave us your thoughts on that there's no such thing as a universal language. Thank you so much for joining Kat and myself on Becoming Inclusive, and we will have you back again. I'm Reginald Ponder, that's Catherine Potts, and that is Flor Garcia. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Becoming Inclusive is presented by the Kaleidoscope Group, your full-service diversity, equity, and inclusion partner serving clients worldwide. Learn more and continue the conversation at kgdiversity.com.